Welcome to this ASP.NET video of tips and tricks. We thought this would be a great place to showcase a lot of the miscellaneous features around ASP.NET 2.0 that we found were very useful during the creation of this video, but otherwise we needed a place to fit the features that didn't fit in the other videos. So we're going to start with a new website like we do in all the videos. And we'll call this Tricks. And I think one of the greatest features that we have here is something that I personally spent a lot of time with working around in ASP.NET 1.1, and that is encrypting sections in your web config. If you recall, if you've seen the data video, the web config, the connection settings area is where we store the connection information for our database. Now, frequently you might have a username and password in here, and that's kind of the Achilles heel because you have to store the password information in clear text. Well, there's a really easy way to encrypt that information and decrypt it, and I'll show you how that works right now. So we'll start by first creating, let me add a new page just for this piece. So we'll create a new web form that will use the protected section of the web config. And let's see, we need some data to work with. I already have a connection to a separate machine that has a database installed on it. So I'll drag the customers table over. And by doing this, I'll get a data grid and also a SQL data adapter. Now if I switch to the web config file, you'll see that the connection string was added automatically here. But look at the connection string. It's not a very good one. It's not using integrated authentication. It's using the old SQL Server style with a user ID and password. So we would like this information to be encrypted. So let's go back to the page. Let me remove some of the columns. We just don't need to see all of this. Okay, that's good. Okay, I need two buttons. The first button will enable the encryption on that section of the web config, encrypt, and my second button will turn it off. So we'll make this one clear. So let's add the handlers for both buttons. I'll just do it quickly by double-clicking on both. And I'm going to bring in some code I have sitting around here in this notepad. Let me copy this and paste it in, and I will explain it. So the first chunk of code goes here at the top, this import namespace command, because we're using some features out of system web config. And then we have a function called encrypt config that takes a boolean, true or false, and we'll call that, I think the first button enables encryption, encrypt config true, and encrypt config false. Let me explain the code. So the relative path to our web.config file is located here off the name of our site. I use the web configuration manager to open the local config file, because you can have these web configs at different layers, different levels in your site. So I want the one at the top level. I want to get the connection setting, the connection string section from the config file, and then either encrypt it using protect section or decrypt it using unprotect section, and finally just save it. So it's just a little simple piece of code right there. So I'll bring this up in a browser. Okay, we see that it works just fine right now, and just to double check, the web config section here is not encrypted. If I scroll down to the very bottom and hit encrypt, the page will refresh, the code runs, and if I switch back here, sure enough it says the file has been modified, and there it is, encrypted. If I go back and hit refresh, the query still works just fine, and I can hit clear text to send it back to normal. So you can see it's just a little bit of code to do that. Now you have to execute that code on every machine that's going to run this, but it's a very handy trick to know about. Actually, there's another handy trick. Notice that I have to scroll down to the bottom each time. Watch this. If I go to protect.aspx and at the top put maintain scroll position on postback and set that equal to true, when I go here to the bottom and encrypt it again, and then go try clear text, notice now it's keeping it at the bottom. So it's remembering the scroll position when I hit these buttons, even though the page is refreshing. Very simple. It's something that's very frustrating if you have to implement that by hand. All right, let's move on to the next tip. So I don't need these two areas anymore. we're going to talk about something called cross-page posting. And for that, I need two pages. Page 1 and page 2. Page 2. Now on the first page, we want to have a simple form. And what we'll do, we'll take the contents of this text box and whatever we select in this calendar control and pass those two values to another page, page 2. Now normally you'd have to do this trick using some kind of session variable. So the button click would be handled inside page 1. You'd stick the two values of the text box and the calendar into a session variable and then do response.redirect or server transfer over to page 2. It's kind of cumbersome and doesn't really make it easy to work with. What we have to do instead is just go to the button and find the postback URL and map that to page2.aspx. And I think that's actually all we have to do for this page. Let me save it. Now go to page 2. This is the page we want to, we'll spit something back out showing you what you typed in that label. And finally, we'll just drag page 1 on here to have a hyperlink to get back. So in the source code for this, I'm going to add a form, page load method. So we'll execute this body of code if the page is not in the postback state. And we'll set the label 1 text equal to, and so you can see where the problem is. We want to set this equal to data coming from the other page. So I'll set up a string.format just to make it clean. I'll say hello 0, you clicked on 1. Now here's where we need to reference the controls from the previous page. And just as you would expect, there's an option here called previous page. I do find control and I want the text box 1. Now it doesn't know what it's returning text box 1 as. In fact, let me do this because this code is going to get a little bit complicated. Let's put it right here. So we know that text box 1 is a text box. So I'll create a variable t as text box and I'll set it equal to the return value of previous page, but I'm going to need to cast that to a text box. So to do that, I use ctype and put all that inside of a text box. Okay, same idea for the calendar control. I'll set that equal to the control on the previous page, find control, calendar 1, and cast that to a calendar. I'm not sure if this is case sensitive, but I'll put that t like that. Okay, now I have access to t's text value and the selected value for the calendar, which I believe is selected date. So we'll see if this works. Before I continue, I've got another trick to show you. I want to just start typing right now, but notice that the cursor is not set to this text box, and I'm guessing the enter key is not mapped to this button. There's a quick thing you can do to fix that, and this is new with ASP.NET 2.0. Inside the form tag, you can now set a default button and a default text box, and it will set the focus for you. So if I scroll to, for the form, default button is button 1, and the control that has the default focus is text box 1. Much better. So let's bring this up in the browser. Now I can start typing right away without setting the caret. If I hit enter, it goes straight to the page. You can see, I probably should have selected something. Let me try that again. So January 31st, Scott. There. So you can see we did the cross-page posting and we were able to enable something I really like, and that's the default button and default focus. Okay, so let me bring up default.aspx and we'll do the rest of our work here. The first thing I want to show you, let's see, this demo will be about using the bulleted list control. So I'll just give a little header section there. So if we look down here, we have this thing called bulleted list, and this is new. I can tie it directly to a